Welcome back! In this video, I'll tell you step by step how I got my very first UX design job in just 3 months, every single thing I did. And I started with no portfolio, no CV, and barely any skills, so I wish I had a guide like this back then. Since it was almost a decade ago, I'll show you how to adjust certain steps to 2024 reality, so the sad economy and higher expectations. I've divided this video into 3 parts: learning design, building your portfolio, and recruitment, so looking for jobs and going through the interview process. I got introduced to product design by a friend who was a front-end developer. I watched some videos online and I really loved the idea. Also, I was just starting my art school back then, so it all really made sense for me. The big question for me was how much do I need to know to get hired and how do I even approach it? So I've decided to reverse engineer it and take a look at some job listings for junior designers to see what the expectations were. Overall, reverse engineering is the theme of this video. Since we don't have a lot of time, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's do exactly the same thing and analyze some job listings together. I'm on LinkedIn Jobs. I'm looking for a product designer, and in experience level, I'll select internship and entry level. I'm looking for those jobs that are 0 to 3 years of experience. Many of them have the 1-year experience requirement. Don't get discouraged by this, it can still apply to you. I'm using product designer as a general category. This is usually how jobs are listed. Product designers have a wider skill set than UX designers. Usually it includes UX design, UI design, and some other skills. And some companies use it interchangeably, but there are way more jobs marked as product designer than a UX designer, but you can try both. Let's take a look at designer at Revolut. So we have a general description about the role, etc. We're going to what you will be doing. This description is really long, but there are some keywords that we can highlight here. For example, working in a cross-functional and distributed team, identifying key metrics, researching, bringing forward new findings. So you need to know something about research, wireframing, end-to-end flows and prototypes, so low fidelity to high fidelity design. You'll be running user testing workshops, then iterate and implement with the technical team, so collaboration with engineers. And the last point is about design systems, so yet another thing to learn. And let's take a look at what you'll need. So you'll need 2 years of experience, a portfolio, strong design skills across iOS, Android, and web platforms. That's important. There is something about product strategy, articulating design decisions, taking ownership, strong UX focus, visual design sense. We have typography and grids. And then in nice to haves, we have technical, higher education, potentially experience in programming, designing and maintaining cross-platform design systems, and working in a fast-paced startup environment. That's a lot of requirements. Let's try to take a look at another listing. Majority of things in the challenges you need are very much overlapping with the previous listing. When it comes to your professional qualities, they are also mentioning design tools like Figma or Sketch or Adobe XD, so that's an important part. Of course, they are asking for portfolio and they want some strong experience with design system, deep knowledge of iOS and Android guidelines, and experience in usability testing. So they are more articulate here, there's less convolution. In professional qualities, in addition to everything that we've seen before, there is also a proficiency in design tools like Figma, Sketch, or Adobe XD, important point. And in nice to haves, we have experience with prototyping and user testing methodologies. Also familiarity with some platforms that are connected to research. I think that those 2 listings provide more than enough information for now. You can search specifically in your region or for the companies that you are interested in, but in majority of cases, those will be the same basics, just written differently. Well, that's a lot of keywords that we've highlighted. If you don't know majority of them, don't worry about it. You're exactly where I was back then. So let's try to clean them up and create some categories. We can call the first category general product design knowledge, and we have some must-haves and nice-to-haves here. When it comes to must-haves, first we have the product design process, and I'll put a link to the video that I've created some time ago that walks you through the whole thing. Another point is articulating design decisions, and there is a really good book about it, which is called Articulating Design Decisions. I'll paste it here for you as well. You can read it. It basically walks you through preparing for a design meeting, going through it, and then managing expectations and communication afterwards. And 2 more items for this category is design strategy and working with cross-functional teams. Now let's take a quick look at some nice to haves. We have basics of programming. I would say some CSS, some HTML, and maybe some JavaScript. That should be enough for a junior designer. Then we have familiarity with startup environment. I would say read a Lean Startup book. that would be enough information for you at this point. And then we had AI for designers. I would say we are not there yet that it will really inform your workflow, but if you want to explore some items, it's up to you. Now let's take a look at executing the design process and all the skills that were related to this. First, we have research. So of course, conducting user interviews, usability testing. I also have a video about it for you. And research platforms. So you need to learn about usertesting.com or Maze, just watch some tutorials online and try their free version. The next big category is design. So it includes wireframing, another video for you, low fidelity, mid fidelity, high fidelity design, and we will talk about all of this later, but the important thing that you need to execute any of the design is Figma, and this is the next point. Basically, Figma. Figma is a design tool that majority of companies use for their product design work, and you don't want this to be your limiting factor. You need to learn the tool very well so that it doesn't block you from progressing as a designer. And I recommend starting with Figma's design or YouTube channel, where they have a lot of tutorials about certain parts of the product and the flows and how to design. You can also look at some design tutorials online and their documentation as well, Figma's documentation, because it's a really good resource as well. There are some courses online that are paid courses. You basically pay more for the structure and someone walking you through and developing your skill set instead of you needing to look for videos or some topics online. And I think it can be a really good alternative because we are pressed on time here, so it is a way more effective way to do it for me. Next is UX and UI design. UX stands for user experience and UI stands for user interface. So UX design is more about flows, information architecture, and figuring out where things should be in the flow and on the screen. UI design is more about the visual side of things, so colors, fonts, how elements look like, maybe even illustrations like UI illustrations. You can also put it in this category. My hot take that maybe some people don't agree with, you need both in today's economy. So I would prefer to learn both UX and UI and things beyond it to become a product designer, because it will be way easier for you to find a job. Of course, some companies hire for just UX design or UI design, but those are mostly really big companies and not for the entry-level jobs, not so much. The next item is designing for web, iOS, and Android. And I'll come back to this topic later on in the video, but in short, you need to be able to design for all of those platforms. So iOS, those are mobile devices from Apple. Android, those are other mobile phones, for example, but they also have Android Car or some other elements that are in the Android system. And web, so what you see in the browser, it can be on your computer or it can be on your phone. For product designers, we are mostly thinking about designing web applications, not websites. In simple words, the difference is that a website displays information, so for example, a blog or a recipe page, and a web application allows users to perform tasks. You can think about YouTube or PayPal or some gaming platforms. We have digressed a little bit, but I think it is really important for you to understand the basics like this. For example, what's the difference between the website and the web app as you're going into UX design. The next point is workshops and presentations, and you need to be able to plan a workshop and present your work. For workshops, I recommend that you read a book called Sprint. It is about the sprint methodology where you go from an idea to a tested prototype in just 5 days. There are some limitations to it that could be a totally separate video, especially for beginners, but for workshops themselves, it's a really good resource. Then we have design systems. It is a really big topic, but for beginners, you need to know what the design system is and how to contribute to one. This requires the understanding of basics like colors, fonts, UI elements. We will dive into that in the next chapter, and knowing what components and variables are in Figma and how to work with them. And the last thing that we've learned from the job ads is what you will need to prepare for the recruitment process. The first thing is portfolio. You will need to showcase your work in the case studies. Then you need your CV and LinkedIn profile. Those are the basics, but every application will require them and you will need to spend some time preparing those. And the last thing is to learn about the process. So how to approach certain meetings and tasks that you will be presented with to actually have a chance to get hired. And recruitment in tech is usually quite complex and takes a couple of weeks. And I will talk about all three of those in the next parts of the video. Okay, so we have all of those categories of things to learn, and back then I didn't have such a good structure. The next question is, where should I start? And I also think it's a good time to remind you to subscribe. The first step that I took was to learn about the UI elements, so all the buttons, pop-ups, menus, command palettes, etc. This was a blocker for me because I didn't understand the structure behind them, when to use what, and what could I even choose from, and it was blocking me from creating designs. I started with analyzing material design. It is a design system for all Android devices and beyond it because Google uses it for apps like YouTube and G Suite, so the docs and all the spreadsheets that you probably use that are connected to your Gmail, so it's not mobile only. Why do I recommend starting here? Is because material design is the easiest to understand and the most beginner friendly. If I were to start with Apple guidelines, for example, I would just quit UX and focus on becoming a cake decorator, which was and still is a valid alternative. To explore it, I recommend you go to their website, see all the basics like colors, fonts, etc. See all the elements, so all the menus, pop-ups, toggle buttons, whatever there is, and analyze them really deeply, read all the guidelines there. You can also go to resources and download their Figma library and just start putting some screens together. Of course, you will probably need to watch some more YouTube videos on how to put the interfaces together, but it is a really good start to just start playing around with it. After you are done with material design, I recommend exploring Polaris by Shopify. It is another design system, very well put together. And then Apple guidelines. You will need them. You will need a lot of patience to go through them, but it's worth it. UI elements are the first area of focus for you, and there are 3 more categories or paths that you need to split your time between in this learning process. The second track that you need to focus on is Figma, and it is super important because you don't want the tool to be limiting you when it comes to designs. You need to be able to design whatever you see in your head, not think about how to do it in Figma. So spend some time on it. And Figma is your best bet because majority of companies use it, and even if they use another software, they are super similar. Basically, you may need to learn 2 or 3 things when switching, but if you know one of them, you know it all. Learning Figma will probably take you some time and will require some patience from you, but don't give up, it's really worth it. And as you're progressing with learning about UI elements, try to draw them in Figma, and then if you see them in particular libraries that you're using, try to see how they are built under the hood. So don't just mindlessly drag and drop them into your designs. Click through them, see what the dimensions are, see how auto layout works. It will really give you a good understanding of how to do it yourself later on. Important thing as well about Figma is to learn about how to prototype. So create those clickable flows through the screens that you're designing. And don't go into some like fancy animations and interactions yet. It's okay to just focus on clicks, interactions, just basic interactions, hover states, etc. The third track is learning about the process, so all the research, usability testing, startups, design system, workshops, things like that, things that are not mockup related. Spend some time learning about this every day. Plan a workshop, do some exploratory research with your friends as if they were your clients, for example. Plan a usability testing for screens and prototypes that you already have, so theory and practice at the same time. And the lane Number 4, after you're comfortable with Figma and you learned a little bit about UI elements, is to start putting together screens for mobile and web. I was initially extremely confused about the sizes and proportions of the elements. For example, how big should a navbar be and why? Or how much margin should I put here? And those are super basic questions, but they are valid. Like, how can you know at the very beginning? What helped me a lot was recreating well-known apps. So I was taking screenshots on my computer or on my phone and I was bringing it to Figma. Sometimes I needed to divide it by 2 and then I was drawing elements on top of it. In Figma, you take a frame that is the size of your screenshot, so your laptop screen or your phone screen, and then you put the screenshot on top of it, lower the opacity, lock the screenshot. You'll be drawing over this screenshot. You can also put it side by side depending on your preferences here. So you'll be drawing shapes, you'll be adding fonts, you'll be using colors, all of that to make the interface look as closely to the screenshot as possible. And as you progress with learning Figma, you can start using auto layout to practice it a little bit more here. Here is a small side note that I would like to share with you that might be useful. So I've noticed many UX courses and UX bootcamps making a really big mistake because they are sharing a design brief with their students and requiring them to design an app from scratch at the very, very beginning of their journey. And I think you don't have all the tools that you need at this point. You need some UI elements, going through design systems, redrawing interfaces first to really get a little bit of a grip regarding how things work and what should it be. You really need to use this time wisely if you want to do it within like 3 months, for example. So there is no need to go around it. Just take a shortcut, learn things first, and then start designing apps and websites or whatever you want to design. Together with redrawing interfaces, you also need to start analyzing the flows that those apps have. And there are some types of UIs that you need to be familiar with. You can take a screenshot of what we will be talking about in a second. So we have a login and sign up, some forms, lists, navigation, onboarding, wizard, feed, like in social media, dashboards, so together with learning how to draw graphs, pop-up dialogues, search, including search results and suggestions, command palette, things like that. You can go to uipatterns.com. I recommend this website. It is not perfect by any means, but it's a really good starting point. Let's move on to creating our own projects and putting together a portfolio. As I was learning about the UI patterns, Figma, and how to execute the design process, I've put together 2 projects that were just for myself. No aim to put them in the portfolio, no pressure of being perfect and being ready, and I recommend you do the same thing. It is important that you give yourself space to learn. Of course, later on you can come back to those projects and adjust them, correct them, and put them in your portfolio, but in reality you will be so over them by the time they are finished that you will just want to start over with a totally new brief. I started with analyzing what I need to put in my portfolio. Remember the reverse engineering part? I knew I needed 4 to 5 projects, and I've decided to go with 3 Android projects and 1 website. And by the way, there is a quite funny video that I made some time ago analyzing this very first portfolio. You can see it here, I'll link it. I had a fairly good reasoning to put 3 Android projects in my portfolio back then. The material design was new and popping, and a lot of companies and agencies in my city were looking for mobile designers who specifically knew material design because they had clients like this, I assume. And it worked back then, but it would absolutely not work today. Today, I would go with a mix of iOS, Android, and web projects. And I mean web app, not a website. You don't want to be a web designer, you want to be a product designer. My best bet would be to have 1 project per platform that is a big feature. So for example, a dashboard for task management app or a video player for a fitness app. And this brings us to 3 projects. Then you can add 1 to 2 projects where you repeat a platform and you create an application from scratch. And this will include not only the main flows, but also things like onboarding, sign up, etc. And I don't recommend doing that for every single project. It is important that you show those skills, that you can design those screens and think to the whole flow. But if you do it for every single project, it would be really time consuming and very repetitive. When it comes to the number of projects that you have in your portfolio, I recommend 4 or 5 projects, maybe 6 if you really want to. I wouldn't go lower than 4 because there's not enough material to look at, and I wouldn't go crazy like 7, 8, 20 projects in your portfolio. This is portfolio of your best work, not all of your work. Another element of the reverse engineering is to take a look first at what companies in your area are hiring for. Are those mostly mobile apps or maybe desktop apps? Is there any trend there that you can adjust your 4th and 5th project to? There are also some niches that you can take a look at, like interaction design or maybe UX writing. I wouldn't recommend focusing your portfolio on them solely when you're a junior designer. It is more for senior designers who already have some experience, but something to think about, something to pay attention to, and also something to remember as you progress in your career. For me, differentiating factors in my portfolio back then were material design and UI illustrations. I knew how to illustrate because I was in art school, so I used it to produce some empty states and put them in my portfolio. And I was really surprised how important it turned out to be in the recruitment process. It was just a different thing from everything else that everyone else was doing. So think about your unfair advantages. Maybe you have some technical background, maybe research background, maybe data analysis background. and think about how you can incorporate it in your portfolio. Long story short, adjust your portfolio to the market and to your particular unique skills. If you don't see any trends like this, don't worry about it, just go with the general recipe that I've shared earlier. Okay, but where to take ideas for your projects and the design briefs from? And this is something that I can help you with. On Outro's Academy website that will be linked below, you can find design briefs that I've created. They are free and there is a good collection of them. They are beginner friendly, easy to understand, quite interesting topics, but remember to tweak them. And also I've added some hints at the bottom on how to approach certain areas that are tricky. Of course, you can find UX briefs in other places online, but please, no matter where you take them from, please adjust them a little bit, tweak them, change the name, change the topic, maybe change the scope a little bit. I've seen so many portfolios based on exactly the same case studies, especially from UX bootcamps or some popular websites. And when you are a recruiter, you may not be entirely aware of all of those examples. So if you see something repeating between the portfolios that is recognizably exactly the same project, you may be suspicious. You may be thinking, okay, is this person collaborating with the other person? Or maybe they copied someone else's work. So basically it's a no-go. Better change the name, change the topic just to be safe. Use those briefs that I've shared on the website as a guideline regarding what the topics can be and also what the scope can be for a design brief. And when you're adjusting them, you can also use ChatGPT to come up with some topics or maybe come up with briefs for your favorite topics. And I have to mention one more thing here. Please do not redesign popular applications. I've seen so many case studies that are YouTube redesign or Spotify redesign. And those are not really case studies, they are more like UI redesigns, but you get what I mean. You cannot redesign an app without necessary data. So designers who work in those companies, they have all the context, all the data, all the research that they want to do, all the business objectives, and they base those designs on all of this information. And then someone comes along and redesigns an application without this whole context, just claiming that it's better. And I think it's fundamentally against what you want to present in your portfolio. You want to present that you respect data, that you need research, that you know the design process. So please just don't do it. I know that I'm maybe too passionate about it, but this topic is really driving me crazy. What you can potentially do is to propose to add a feature to an existing app. So for example, I don't know, a watch party for YouTube, something like this. This is something that you can potentially defend because you can do research, so talk to your friends who use YouTube and gather some data regarding on what they need, then go through the whole design process, testing process, all of those good things that are to be shown in your portfolio. And this is something, if you really want to do it, that's a possibility. Remember to use the design system that the platform has, so it looks like from the same family, and please mark it as a concept in your portfolio. So it doesn't look like you were working for YouTube, for example, because it's really misleading if someone thinks that, and then you need to clarify that during the recruitment process. As you're thinking about your portfolio projects, you also need to think about the structure of your portfolio a little bit in advance so that you are able to prepare all the necessary materials that you will need to include in the case study. And it is a separate topic for a big video, but I have some videos for you and even a course. First, check out how to build a UX case study using Notion. This is my video that I've created some time ago, and even if you don't end up using Notion for your portfolio, it includes a case study template that you can use no matter where your portfolio will be. It's a really good start. It's not perfect, but it's a really good start. Then there is a portfolio playlist from me that you can watch. Those are videos about different topics connected to portfolios. And also I have a free 5-day portfolio masterclass that you can join totally for free, as I said. It is useful before you create your portfolio, but definitely useful when you already have your portfolio done, like the first draft, and you want to improve certain things so it appears a little bit more mature, more senior. A question that many students ask me is, do I need a website? And the answer is yes. Or a Notion page. You can adjust Notion and customize it that you can actually present case studies there. And I actually recommend it if you're in a rush or you don't know how to build websites. I think that they also improved their website offering recently, so it might be even better than it used to be before. Overall, you need space where you can present your work and build your case studies with a little bit more freedom to customize the structure. So for websites, you can definitely use website builders, like for example, Wix. That's a really good builder, fairly easy to use. Webflow, I recommend it. It's a little bit more difficult, but it pays off to really learn it. It's a good skill to have, and the level of customization is basically indefinite. You can also use Notion, as I mentioned before. It is customizable and you can really work wonders with what's available on the platform. And since we are pressed on time, this might be the best option for you. If you take only one thing from this video, is to not use services that are image only, like Behance or Dribbble, to showcase your case studies, your UX case studies, and build your portfolio. They are great for showing visuals to the community, but they are not so great for building case studies. We need structure, we need text, we need columns, we need paragraphs, we need sections, so all of those elements. So either a website or Notion it is. There's one more thing that I need to share with you, but I'm a little hesitant because it can backfire. So I recommend looking at examples of other portfolios online. It is really helpful to see how people describe projects, how they think through the process, etc. But you need to be really critical. Take the good things and leave the bad things behind, because there are so many portfolios out there that are just not of the quality that you want to copy. I know it helps to have an example and something to get inspired by, but I'm hesitant because there is so much bad work online, and if you copy something bad, and it's really easy to do it if you're a beginner because you don't really know what works, what doesn't work, and why you should avoid certain things, then you're on this path of creating a bad portfolio, and it's something that I really don't want for you. So to help you out a little bit, in the description I left 3 portfolios that I think are really high quality that you can get inspired by. And please don't copy them, don't go one-to-one copy, but see how people are presenting the case studies, what is the structure, how they describe the projects, what is the proportion between images and text, things like that. Just a disclaimer, I'm recording it in September 2024, so I have no influence what's going on with those portfolios afterwards. So if something weird happens there, please don't blame me. I'm saying those are good examples as of now. Okay, moving on to the last part. Let's say that you have your portfolio ready, you did some projects, you feel pretty confident, and now it's time to look for jobs. But how to really go about it? Of course, 10 years ago, I've been looking for jobs online, and this didn't change much. You will be probably looking for your first job online as well. You might be going to some conferences or some local events. That could be also a thing, but online is a main resource. And if you're a beginner, you're most likely to find an entry-level job in your area. So remote jobs are an option, but most likely for mid-level and senior designers. I'm not saying it's impossible to find an entry-level remote job, but it will be more rare than local jobs in offices. I recommend starting with LinkedIn jobs. I think this is the most universal platform where companies post their job listings. Of course, every country and even every city will have their own local job posting services, which you can use for sure. But LinkedIn jobs, it's a good place to start. And also you can go directly to the websites of the companies that you're interested in. Just scroll down, usually all the way down to the footer, and look for jobs or careers, and you'll find it here. To apply, you will need your CV. Just keep it simple, use a Google Doc template. Don't go overboard with any graphics, anything like this. You'll need your portfolio link, and you will need your LinkedIn profile. And just a tip here from me, please put just a product designer label on your LinkedIn profile. Don't go with anything like junior product designer, aspiring product designer, product design student. It's just not as trustworthy, and they will figure out that you're a junior designer. I made this mistake years ago, and every time, honestly, I look at it, it just makes me cringe. And please, 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 if there are some additional fields to fill out, like some questions or a cover letter, don't go too official on this one. Please fill them out. It's super important to do it, and don't use ChatGPT because some companies can detect it. Try to put yourself in a position of someone who's analyzing your application. So they are looking at 3 pillars: your portfolio, your CV, so your education and experience, and your application, so how you filled out the form. With portfolio, you can do a great job. You can have amazing projects, but they will never be like 100% because most likely they will be example projects, junior projects, or just portfolio projects that you've created. Nothing wrong with that, but you will never hit like 100% mark there. Then for CV, You can have amazing education if you have that, but with experience, it will never just speak for itself because you don't have much experience working as a designer. So application becomes a really important pillar there. It can show your communication skills and how excited you are about the job, how motivated you are. And I can't tell how many applications I've rejected because they didn't take time to even fill out the form and fill out the questions that we are asking for. So for your own good, just do it well. If a company is interested, they will take you through their recruitment process, usually a series of meetings and some activities. On average, I would say 3 to 6 meetings. So prepare for like 2 weeks of the recruitment process, best case scenario. Sometimes it takes over a month, so just prepare for a longer time. And it is a red flag if they want just to invite you to a 30-minute call with their boss and you're hired. Probably not the most mature organization. Now I'll give you an overview of the usual meetings that happen throughout the process. Back then, I didn't have any idea basically about those meetings. I was just figuring out as I was being invited to the next one. Funny story actually, for my very first job, I needed to go through a workshop with other people who applied and were shortlisted. The idea was that we had to solve a UX problem as a group, but at the same time stand out. So now that I think about it, it's a super toxic and weird idea, but I went through it. And luckily, people were playing fair, but imagine there's a lot of room for things like locking someone in the bathroom or giving them laxatives, and yeah, too much potential for drama. So I wouldn't implement it in the recruitment process, but things like this happen as well. So don't be surprised if there are some weird practices in the recruitment process. The more usual processes usually start with an intro call with someone from HR. It is usually around 30 minutes long, so it's quite short. And it's about getting to know you a little bit, your communication style, talking about your experience briefly and your expectations. To prepare, read about the company. They should have About Us or How We Work section on their website. Go through their product, so log in if it's possible for general public, or at least watch some YouTube videos or go through documentation so that you know what the product is about, and read carefully the job description, so the job listing that you were provided at the beginning from where you applied, so that you know how to answer questions and skew them a little bit, your answers, towards the description so that they can check off certain things from their list. They may also ask you about your salary expectations, so be prepared for that. And if you want to, you can also ask about the salary range at this point. Next, you'll probably meet your future manager for a technical interview. They may ask you about your design process, about your least and most favorite project, or basically any project, like a recent project at all. They want you to walk them through it. About how you work with a team, with engineers, with other designers, with product manager, and what your career goals are. And please prepare some questions for every call. Usually they leave around 5 to 10 minutes at the end of every call for you to ask questions. And it's really important to do it. Actually, it's a faux pas if you don't have any questions. You come across as uninterested, basically. You can ask about the team structure, what they are working on currently, what is the challenge that the company is facing right now, what are the growth opportunities, how the decisions are being made. You can also ask about more details regarding the design team, how they are working, what rituals they have, what kind of management style this manager has. Maybe it's not a direct question, just ask around it. But the idea is that you need to find out about the company as much as possible. Those questions are supposed to let you decide whether or not you want to join this organization. Also, please don't ask about things like how long is your lunch break, or can you take the PTO after a month of working there. Those are important questions, but we are aiming higher. So please ask about more high-level strategic things. Honestly, each type of meeting is a huge topic about how to prepare for it and how to answer the most common questions depending on who you're talking to. So if you would like me to record a separate video or maybe even a course about the recruitment process for UX designers, please let me know in the comments. Another meeting that can happen is a portfolio presentation. You will be asked to present either your whole portfolio or one project from your portfolio. And I prepared some hints for you to just allow you to prepare better for this meeting. Prepare actual styles. Do not show them your website or your Figma files. Just prepare an actual presentation with visuals and reasonable amount of text. Do not write out your whole presentation, no walls of text on the slides. You will be there to present your slides, so they should behave as helpers. Practice it very well beforehand to A, be more confident, and B, make sure that you make the time limit. Assume time for questions after your presentation. So if a meeting is scheduled, for example, for 1 hour, use around 40 minutes of it for your presentation and then leave 20 minutes for questions. The same thing for 45 minutes. I wouldn't use more than 30 minutes for the presentation. Also, let them know at the beginning of the meeting that this is your plan. Be prepared for questions. Take a critical look at your presentation and try to speculate what they can ask about. What would you ask about? Maybe some visual choices, maybe you've skipped some steps or added some steps. Did you do the research? Maybe you've used some unusual methodology. Just think about what would be the interesting point to ask about. And when answering those questions, don't be defensive. Of course, try to defend your work a little bit, but it's more of a discussion about why you've made certain decisions, and they want to also see if you're comfortable with your decisions, but open to potential feedback and discussing it. So there is a balance to it. Don't be afraid to say things like, oh, you have a really good point here, and if I were to approach it once again, if I were to make this project happen once again, I would definitely try your approach. Yet another type of call is a culture fit interview. It can be called differently, but the idea is that you will be meeting some of your colleagues, a designer, a product manager, or maybe an engineer. Their objective is to get a feeling about your communication style, about your behavior in general, and handling issues. They may ask you about helping coworkers, about resolving conflict in the past, or about some difficult situations from the past projects and how you handle it. How to answer correctly is yet another big topic, but I can give you a quick hint. Don't blame others, take responsibility, and show growth from this situation. So for example, if you messed up some designs in the past, recognize that you did it, why it was your fault, so what you did wrong in this situation, show how you fixed it. So for example, you performed additional research or you made another iteration, you did something to fix the situation, and how you've grown from it. So for example, you've improved some processes in the team, or now you know that you need to do things differently and took a note of it and applied it in the upcoming project. Prepare for those answers and prepare how you would answer those questions, because on the spot you probably will not think about it. And you can also look online for some hints. Those are pretty universal questions, so they don't apply only to designers. You can also receive a take-home task from the company based on the brief that they created. It usually should be around 2 hours to 2 days to provide a solution. From my experience, it is on average 2 to 4 hours. This is the most common practice. Then you need to show the solution, so send them the solution or present it during the call, answer some questions and probably defend your decisions, have a little bit of a discussion. I think that there is a lot to be said about it, but probably the most important thing is to ask questions before you start the design process. So when you receive the brief and you don't know whether it should be mobile or web design or low or high fidelity, you can ask. The worst thing that can happen is that they will tell you just figure it out based on how much time you have and what do you think would be the best solution. So usually probably when you have short time to do it, low fidelity, and the platform probably depends on the project. But you can be like in square one after asking questions. But sometimes they expect you to ask questions, and it's basically impossible to resolve this brief without asking questions. So it may be a part of the task. Oh, and one more thing, don't go crazy over time. So if you have 4 hours to do this project, maybe spend like 4.5 top, because it's really easy to see if someone have spent 8 hours on the task that was supposed to take 4 hours, and it will definitely lower your score afterwards, because they will just suspect that you're lying. A variation of the design exercise can be a live design session. Not many companies do it, but I personally really like it because it allows you to get to know each other's working styles. The idea is basically that you're meeting for around 2 hours and have a workshop style type of meeting where you join the meeting, they give you the brief, you can ask some questions. Sometimes they role play. So for example, an engineer would be a user or a product person would be a user. So you can like mock research. And then you basically are supposed to open Figma and start designing, usually in low fidelity. It is definitely not about providing a perfect high fidelity solution. It is more about showcasing your process. So going through this mock research or asking questions and then brainstorming ideas and collaborate with the team. And I know it might sound a little bit stressful, especially for beginners, but there are good sides to it. So it is a 2-hour meeting, so expectations regarding the solution are lower than from 4-hour tasks, the take-home tasks that you would do normally. Also, you can collaborate a little bit with the team, show your personality, ask questions, and if you need to pivot from your initial idea, so do a quick turn and just go in another direction, you can do it during the meeting. If you have a take-home task and you have a wrong idea at the very beginning, you are on this highway to nowhere for 4 hours. And the last meeting to mention is the leadership call. In some companies, you may be able to meet the CEO or a head of product or head of design. It really depends. Someone usually from the higher management who's leading your organization. It depends on the size of the company. Of course, if you're in a startup, you'll probably meet a CEO. If you're in a bigger company, that will not be possible. It will be just probably a manager of your manager. This is usually the last step before checking references and the offer, so it's quite hard to mess up here unless you do something really crazy. Just be respectful, be curious, be excited about the opportunity and express it, and ask high-level questions about the company goals and how they work with design, so something that is more adjusted towards the leader who you're talking to. Before the offer, companies can ask you for references, people you worked with, maybe teachers from university if you used to be a student, or your past clients. It seems to be unlikely for entry-level positions, but it happens in many companies. The usual practice is to have around 2 to 3 references, and this company will invite these people to separate calls around 15-30 minutes to answer some questions about how it was working with you, the positive and the negative experiences, and the areas for growth potentially. I personally don't like this step because, of course, you're going to ask people who are going to speak well about you. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it is what it is. It is a practice that you should be prepared for. One last thing before we wrap up. When applying for jobs, be patient and apply to as many jobs as you can. Of course, with high quality applications, filling out the forms, attaching everything that they need. It's not 2020 anymore, so lower your expectations and expect that for 100 applications that you send, you may hear back from 3. What I'm trying to say here is to lower your expectations and don't be too harsh on yourself. Ultimately, what you need is one really good offer. And of course, it's better to be in a position when you have 2 or 3 to choose from. But ultimately in life, in many cases, you just need one good job, one good partner, and one good house to buy. So it's really doable. Well, this was my experience. It took me 3 months to go through the whole process. Let's be honest, I was working really hard, but also I got extremely lucky. And it doesn't matter if it takes you 3 months or a year to get to the point and get your first job. The best time to start the whole process is right now, because the time will pass anyways. Comment section is of course open for you. If you have any questions, I'll be replying there. Also, let me know if you would like me to record a video about the job interview meetings, so how to prepare for them and how to answer questions so you can check all the boxes. Let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.